أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Respected Professor Emeritus Dr. Muhammad Nazari bin Ismail from Faculty of Business and Economics, University of Malaya, Dr. Olsi Jazekski from Department of History and Civilization, International Islamic University, Malaysia, Dr. Ahmad Al-Muhammadi from International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC, IIUM, Dato Professor Dr. Abdulaziz Bargut, Dean, International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, professors, associate professors, lecturers, IIMU fellows, students, and participants. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, on behalf of IIMU, International Institute for Muslim Unity of International Islamic University, Malaysia, I welcome all of you to this unique forum on Palestine, focusing on occupation, war, resistance, and surviving genocide. We have with us three eminent scholars who are truly the experts in this topic of Palestine. Professor Nazari Ismail is a well-known scholar who has been delivering many speeches on issues related to Palestine. Likewise, we have Dr. Olsi, who is also very active. And more importantly, we have also Dr. Ahmad Al-Muhammadi, who is also well known for his expertise on counter-terrorism and counter-Islamophobia and other related issues. IIMU, which is an International Institute for Muslim Unity, has been organizing series of talks and lectures on various issues facing the Muslim Ummah, focusing on Muslim unity, Muslim minority issues, Muslim leadership issues, and so on. And for today, we have chosen this most important and relevant topic of Palestine, because we have been hearing about many news about Palestine, and we feel that it is important for us to really look at history of how Palestine has been established based on several historically framed conspiracies as well as other schemes. We have with us Dr. Abdulaziz Bargut, the Dean of International Institute of Islamic Thought, and I really wish to invite him to say a few words for our participants. May I respectfully call upon Dato Professor Dr. Abdulaziz Bargut to deliver his opening remarks. فليتفضل دكتور.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. First of all, thank you very much indeed, Prof. Tamim, for number one, organizing this important forum, and number two, inviting me to say a few words at the beginning of this very important event. I think I commend the work or the initiative undertaken by IIMU, and I think we discussed before that we need to have more and more forums and seminars and engagements as far as the question and the case of Palestine is concerned. And I think this is one of the important events today. I would like also to receive and welcome all the distinguished speakers, Prof. Nazari, Dr. Olsi, Dr. Ahmed Al-Muhammadi, and also Prof. Tamim as moderator for this. I welcome also all the participants who are joining us, not only from Malaysia, but from many other parts of the world, looking for your wisdom and your ideas. Dear professors, researchers, brothers and sisters, we are initiating this program from the perspective of the unity of the Ummah. As IIMU is an international institute for the Muslim unity, and we want to see how this factor of one Ummah, unity of the Ummah, global unity of the Ummah, can be one of the medication, one of the solutions to this very persistent issue, because the issue of Palestine needs to be seen from this perspective of the whole Ummah, the whole Islamic world, the whole Islamic civilization, and also from the humanity-centered perspectives, so that we deal with the question of the occupation and the question of injustices from a just and fair perspective, not only of the Muslim world, but also of the rest of the free people of the world who see in these atrocities and genocide, they see that the moral decadence and the how humanity can go low when it comes to dealing with the value of human life. So I think in this perspective, in this context, we wanted really to see how and what will be the solutions, the suggestions to deal with the situation. I think our scholars here, they can look at it from their different perspectives, and our participant can enrich the discussions. In the end, we need to come up with some kind of suggestions and recommendations on the way forward, inshallah. With this, once again, I thank Prof. Tamim and his team, IIMU, and all the scholars and the participants for coming and participating in this important event. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Dr. Abdulaziz Bargood, Dean of ISTAC, for your opening speech. And thank you for your support in all activities organized by IIMU. When we talk about Palestine, some important historical incidents come to our mind. To begin with, we should see the rise of Zionism, how Zionism came into existence, what were its objectives and aims, and so on. Beginning with that rise of Zionism, we can see how the process of colonization of Palestine took place. Then we can also look at the arrival of the Jewish settlers from Eastern Europe and Russia, starting from 1882. Then the most important event was in 1917, which was nothing but Balfour Declaration. And that was leading to the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And the climax of all these issues was the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. Likewise, we have several historical incidents to see that culminated into the establishment of a Jewish state on the heartland of Islam and Muslims, which is Palestine. With this, we move on to our first speaker. Our first speaker is Dr. Olsi, who is from Albania, who is also an assistant professor at Department of History and Civilization. And he will be focusing on 128 years of war, resistance, and surviving the genocide. May I respectfully call upon Dr. Olsi to deliver his speech. Welcome, Dr. Olsi. Dr. Olsi, you need to unmute.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Tamim and all the others. I'd like to thank you for inviting me in this very important forum. Today, I'm going to present a summary of what I teach to my students in the Department of History. We have a course entitled History of Palestine Question, where we teach to our students the history of Palestine from the invention of Zionism to the present genocide in Gaza. Now, to illustrate my lecture, I'm going to share with you my PowerPoint that you can see here. And as you can see, the title of my presentation will be Palestine 128 Years of War, Resistance, and Surviving the Genocide. The picture that you can see here is from the year 2020, when we had Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, the present war criminal Prime Minister of Israel, with the then President of United States, Donald Trump, when they signed the so-called Abraham Accords, where we have Bahrain and United Arab Emirates normalize and establish relations with Israel. Now, why this is important about Palestine, I'm going to explain in a moment. How do I do this? Okay. One moment, okay. So, all right. So, the Palestinian issue didn't start today. It started in the year 1897. This is a year when the Zionist project will come into being. Until this very moment, the Jews were a minority population living in Europe. Most of them were concentrated into what we know in history as a Pale settlement, which were regions of the Russian Empire encompassing countries like Poland, Ukraine, southern Russia, Latvia, Lithuania, and so forth. But the end of the 19th century will bring nationalism and the so-called Eastern question into the agenda of the European imperial powers. With the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 and the Congress of Berlin of 1878, and now that the Ottoman Empire is being weakened, we will have European imperial powers which are going to start and planned about the future division of the Ottoman lands. And in this time, a number of Jewish intellectuals and bankers, they will come to think about their own future. As we all might probably know, Jews have historically been hated and persecuted in Europe, and in particular in Russia. This is connected with their biblical history, because according to the Orthodox and the Catholic Church, they were perceived as enemies of Jesus Christ and killers of Jesus. And moreover, especially with the reforms that will happen in Russia during the time of Alexander II, and their mass immigration towards Germany and United States, Jews will become the major bankers of the West. They will be sponsoring revolutions, they will be sponsoring governments, and many of them will involve themselves in the socialist and communist movement. So in order to save themselves from this persecution, in the year 1896, we are going to have a Jewish intellectual and journalist, Theodor Herzl, which is going to write the book Der Judenstaat, or the State of the Jews. And in 1897, after lobbying different rich Jewish groups, they will have their first Congress in Basel, Switzerland, where the Jews, or the Zionist Jews, will establish their nationalist movement, which will be known as Zionist. And from this moment onward, they will demand and they will start working for establishing a homeland for the Jewish people. For those people who have read or studied, like my students do, the history of Zionism in the 19th century, the Jews in this time, they didn't have any clear idea where they are going to establish their state. According to Herzl, their Jewish state could have been established either in Palestine or in Argentina. But now that we will have the establishment of the Zionist movement, we will have a growing interest by especially rich Jewish bankers like the Rothschild family, who are going to think of establishing their homeland in Palestine. In this time, Palestine, which was known as the Mutasarrifat al-Quds, and which was part of Vilayat al-Sham, or Syria, belonged to the Ottoman Empire. But the Ottomans, during the Russo-Turkish War, or the so-called Crimean War of 1853, will take big loans from the Rothschild brothers, who were Jewish bankers in London and in Paris. And because the Ottomans will fail to pay their riba, or interest, to the Zionists, they will be forced in 1879 to declare bankruptcy of the Ottoman state. Now, the Zionist bankers, who knew that the Ottomans were economically doing very bad, they will approach the then Sultan Abdul Hamid II. They will offer him to pay his debt, the debts of the Ottoman state, in exchange for giving them Palestine. But Sultan Abdul Hamid is going to refuse this, and in 1909 we'll have a coup in Turkey, where a new nationalist Turkish power will come to power, known as the Jean Turks. The Jean Turks, they will be sponsored by who else? The Zionists. And one of their chief advisors will be a young Jewish Ukrainian by the name of Vladimir Jabotinsky. Vladimir Jabotinsky, who will be the teacher of Benzion Meliovsky, and Benzion Meliovsky was the father of Benjamin Netanyahu, will be one of the main ideologues who will be sponsored by this Zionist international to push the Jean Turks to distance the Ottoman Empire from Islam, to topple Sultan Abdul Hamid, who was a pan-Islamist. And then finally, this extremist Turkish ideology will put the Ottomans, or will push the Ottomans to join World War I. Now, World War I, which will also be known as the First World War, which will last from 28 July 1914 to 11 November 1918, will be one of the major wars that humanity is going to witness in the 20th century. The Ottomans are going to join this war, and they will ally themselves with Germany and Austro-Hungary. We'll have two fighting powers. One will be the Allied powers, and the other one will be the Central powers. The Central powers are going to lose the war, even though they will have many victories, like the victory of Gallipoli, when the Ottomans and the Germans, they will defeat the British and French alliance who wanted to invade Istanbul. But what will happen is that in the year 1917, a miracle is going to happen for the British. They are going to sign a secret agreement with the Zionist lobby, who in exchange will convince the Americans to join the war on behalf of France and United Kingdom. And moreover, rich Jewish bankers, they are going to sponsor the British monarchy to win its war against Germany and the Ottomans. Now, during World War I, the British and the French will design their future plans for the Middle East, and they will sign a very infamous agreement known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement of January 1916, where, according to this agreement, as you can see on the map, the French and the British and the Russians, but the Russians will be the Russians. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
So,
yes, yes.
all right. So we will have the British and the French who will design their future plans for the colonization and division of the Arab world, where the British will, in a way, convince the French to give them the area of what we know nowadays as Palestine, which in this time was not a unified province, but it was separated into different mutasarrifats and vilayets. They'll convince the French that the area of Palestine and what we know nowadays as Jordan, Iraq, and Kuwait will become British colonies. Now, the British, they'll capture the mutasarrifat of Quds, or the province of Jerusalem, on December 9, 1917. When the British will capture Jerusalem from the Ottomans, the British and the American magazines of this time, they will celebrate this victory as a victory of the cross over the crescent. Here you can see one of the newspapers of the time, where the capture of Jerusalem is being depicted as Jerusalem being rescued by the British after 673 years of Muslim rule. So World War I will be, in a way, celebrated as a major crusade of the Franco-British imperialism against Islam, but not only. Now, the British, in order to win the war, they'll need a lot of money, and for this reason, in the year 1917, on November the 2nd, the British Foreign Secretary, Lord Balfour, is going to sign a document that you can see on the left-hand side of my screen, known as the Balfour Declaration, where the British government will undertake the support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. Now, what will happen is that after this agreement, the war will go very well for the British. In 1918, they are going to defeat the Ottomans. They will force them in December 1918 to sign the Armistice of Mudros. Istanbul or Constantinople, which was the seat of the Islamic Caliphate, will be invaded and there will be no more Ottomans. So what is going to happen is that now the British and the French, they're going to inherit what we know nowadays as the Arab lands, which in this time belonged to the Ottoman Empire. Now, after establishing their rule, the British, they will support the process of Jewish colonization in Palestine. Like the British had done in other countries of the world, well, they will bring settlers, like they have done in South Africa, in Malaysia, and wherever. They will implement the same policies. The British in this time, they are going to appeal to Slavic Jews or white Jews, people from Poland, from Russia, from Belarus, many of whom were escaping the communist system of Lenin, to come and settle themselves in Palestine. For this, they will be supported by Jewish bankers and the World Jewish Congress, which had its center in the city of London, and many poor Jewish peasants, most of them were Slavic speakers, are going to abandon Eastern Europe, Russia, and Ukraine, and they will settle in the colony of Palestine. But the mass settlement of Jews in Palestine will cause many riots. We'll have a number of Arab revolts in 1920, in 1921, and the most important one was in 1929, known as the Burak Revolt, where Muslims are going to revolt against the Jews, or these East European white Jews. Many of them, they were not even religious. Many of them were even Marxist, Leninist, or communists. But they're going to revolt because they are going to see that these people, after coming in Palestine, they'll start to take over their lands, their properties, and moreover, in 1929, they will attempt even to take parts of Haram al-Sharif or Masjid al-Aqsa and the so-called Wailing Wall that the Jews call, or what we as Muslims know as Burak Wall. Now, from 1919 to 1948, what we know nowadays as Palestine will be administered by the British as a mandate. You can see here on the left the agreement where the League of Nations is going to recognize a British mandate over Palestine. Now, the process of Judaization of Palestine will be supported not only by the British, but even by other European powers. The British will be the main supporters of the colonization of Palestine with Jews. Why? Because they had financial interests with Jewish bankers, and moreover, they will see the placement of Jews in Palestine as good and serving to their interests. Like you had the white settlers in South Africa who were placed there in order to control the resources of Africa. The same thing will happen in Palestine. But it was not only the British, even the Germans. And this time we have a Nazi government in Germany, where on 25th of August 1933, we'll have the Nazi government of Adolf Hitler, which is going to sign an agreement with the Zionist Jews, known as the Havara Agreement, where the German government is going to facilitate the migration of Jews towards Palestine. we have to understand the historical context in this time. Europeans all hated the Jews. Why? Because they were perceived as foreigners, as not belonging to Europe, as people who were involved in usury, and as bankers. There was a particular hatred in Germany. Why? Because after First World War, Germany will be severely punished by the League of Nations, will be asked to pay reparations to France and Germany, and most of this money was going to the Jewish bankers. So Hitler wanted to get rid of them, and here is a short video which explains that.
The Germans.
Now, while Jews will be moved from Europe, Germany, Russia into Palestine, we will have the emergence of a new war in Europe, which will be known as World War II. Now, during World War II, as Nazi Germany will come into conflict with the Soviet Union and Britain, Adolf Hitler is going to target the Jews because, according to him, it was the Jews of London and Jews of Moscow, those who were punishing Germany. And during World War II, the German state will have a program which will target the Jews as unwanted people. This program, which we nowadays know as the Holocaust, will be a major push for the Jews of Europe to leave Germany and Europe and to settle themselves in Palestine. Now, the massive Jewish settlement program will come to a climax after World War II, when the British and the Americans and the Soviets who had won World War II were very favorable on helping the Jews to establish their own state. The Jewish state will be established or will be declared on May 14, 1948, when David Ben-Gurion, a Jewish communist, will declare the establishment of the State of Israel. And as we know the story, Soviet Union will be the first country to officially recognize the creation of Israel, because the hope of Soviet Union and Stalin was that Israel will become a communist country, which will never happen. But with the establishment of the Jewish state, we will have the first massive massacres that Jewish settlers are going to carry against native Arab population. These massacres, which will be known as the Nakba by the Arabs, will force from 1947 to 1948 around 726,000 native Palestinians to leave Palestine. This was because of the organized terror that Jewish Zionist gangs are going to conduct against the native population. Now, after Second World War, Britain wanted to keep Palestine as its colony, but the Jews who were planted in Palestine by the British will now go against their masters by declaring war against Britain, and with the support of the United States, they will force Britain to hand over the mandate of Palestine in 1947 to the United Nations. And finally, when the British are going to leave Palestine on May 14, 1948, the Zionist Jews will declare the creation of the state of Israel. A major supporter for the creation of Israel will be the United States and the then US President Harry Truman, who will be, in a way, an agent and paid by the Zionist lobby. So from 1948 to this day, we are going to see a kind of marriage between the state of Israel and United States. Every American president who comes to power, he has to obey to the Jewish lobby, because it is the Jewish bankers who fund the elections of American presidents. Now, the creation of State of Israel will provoke the first Arab War of 1948-1949, will provoke the Palestinian refugee issue, where we'll have hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who will be ethnically cleansed from their native homeland, and they will end up as refugees throughout the Arab world, but mainly in Egypt, in Jordan, in Syria, and in Lebanon. And then after the creation of the State of Israel and the empowerment and the development of the State of Israel, thanks to massive West German sponsorship of Israel as part of the reparation agreement between the Federal Republic of Germany and Israel in 1942, Israel will become a major industrial and military power in the Middle East. And Israel is going to launch a number of wars against the neighboring Arab countries. So we'll have the first Arab-Israeli war of 1948. We'll have the second Arab-Israeli war directed against Egypt, or known as the Suez Crisis of 1956. And we will have the third Arab-Israeli war of 1967, when Israel, after being established in 1948, in 1946, is going to defeat the neighboring Arab states which were controlling the territories that we know nowadays as Palestine. The West Bank, which was controlled by Jordan, Gaza Strip, which was part of Egypt, East Jerusalem, which was part of Jordan, the Sinai Peninsula, which was part of Egypt, and the Golan Heights, which were part of Syria, will all be invaded by Israel, which, supported by the Americans and the British, with its military and air superiority, will manage to defeat the Arabs one after the other. Now, the year 1967 can probably be perceived as the year when the Palestinian issue becomes really problematic, because those Palestinians who were living until this time in the West Bank, most of them were refugees from other parts of Israel, and in Gaza Strip until 1967, they were living under different Arab states. But from 1967 to this day, these Arabs, that we call them Palestinians today, will come under direct Israeli rule. So Israel will become a colonial power even over those territories, which we know as Palestine, recognized by a majority of the United Nations member states. But even these territories that we know nowadays as the Palestine after the partition will be also colonized by Israel. Now, Israel will have a very hard time with the Arabs, probably until the year 1973. In 1973, when Egypt is going to launch the Ramadan War, or the War of Yom Kippur, Israelis will be, in a way, not beaten, but come into a stalemate with Egypt. And the Americans, who were their major sponsors, will understand that Egypt was a major, formidable power that could defeat Israel and end the Jewish state if the Americans were not there. So what the Americans are going to do after the war of Yom Kippur, they are going in a way to corrupt the Egyptians and force them or convince them to sign the Camp David Accords of 1978, when Egypt, since 1948 to 1978, will become the first Arab nation which officially is going to recognize Israel, and in 1979 is going to sign a peace agreement with Israel. And from the year 1979 to this day, Egyptians will officially abandon the Palestinians. They'll tell to Israelis, okay, you have invaded Gaza Strip, you have invaded the West Bank, that's your job. Important is that you don't attack us anymore. When Egypt will sign the Camp David Accords, in the Arab world, Egyptians will be perceived as traitors. They will be even expelled from the Arab League. But what will happen is that as the time will pass by, and as the Soviet Union will lose its power and finally will collapse in 1991, different Arab regimes, starting with Jordan and then continuing with the Gulf Arab states, they will all, one after the other, come and surrender and approach the Americans and tell them, look, we are going to recognize Israel, we will abandon the Palestinians. And what this thing will bring is that in the year 1987, when the Palestinians will see that their neighboring Arab states, except probably Syria, they will except Syria, they will abandon the Palestinian case. We will have Palestinians start to fight for their own freedom through the first Intifada, which will be a major uprising from 1987 to 1993, where the Palestinians will demand freedom for themselves. But the year 1991 will be a very problematic year for the Palestinians, because in this time we'll have the fall of the Soviet Union, and the fall of Soviet Union will witness new US policies towards the Arab world. We'll have the first Arab American or the Gulf War, where the Americans, they're going to defeat Iraq of Saddam Hussein in 1991. And I don't have time to play this video because I'm being told that I have only 5 minutes. In 1991, President George Bush is going to hold this famous speech in the US Congress, where he will announce the creation of a new world order. And after this, we will see the Americans that they will start a number of well-planned wars against those Arab nation states which were supporting the Palestinians. While in 1993, in order to appease the Palestinians and end their intifada, the US administration of President Clinton will force the Palestinians and Israelis to sign the Oslo Accords, which were meant that this will lead to the creation of a Palestinian state. These accords will come to an end with the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin by an extremist Jewish ultra-nationalist. And with the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, we will have the Labour Party, which was ruling Israel until this time, to lose power, and we will have the Likudniks. The Likud party, whose Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in this moment, they will come to power and they'll say there will be no Palestinian state, and they will kill any peace attempt by the Americans. Then, to summarize, because I don't have time, we'll have September 11, 2001. I want to remind our viewers that on September 11, 1991, George Bush Sr. will announce the creation of a new world order. On September 11, 2001, we'll have some mysterious terrorist attacks against the United States, and the US administration of George Bush the younger, the second, they are going to use this as a justification for launching the so-called war on terror. This war on terror, which will continue from 2001 to 2021, will be calculated wars by US administrations against those Arab and Islamic countries which supported the Palestinians. The most important will be probably the Second Iraq War of 2003, when the Americans, they are going to topple the regime of Saddam Hussein. And then this will be followed by other wars. I have another video. I can share this slide with you and you can see it later on, where in 1995, Benjamin Netanyahu predicted that militant Islamists were going to bomb the World Trade Center. And when the bombing of the Twin Towers will happen in 2001, Netanyahu will use it to the maximum to push the Americans to go to war against all Arab Muslim nation states in order to deprive Palestinians from any support. And as General Wesley Clark has revealed in the year 2003, in 2001, he learned from the State Department that the Americans, after September 11, they had planned to go to war against 7 countries in 5 years, which were Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off with Iran. What did these countries have in particular? They were all supporting the Palestinians. We will have the establishment of a new world order, and this new world order will be explained by Prime Minister Mahathir in a meeting of Islamic Conference in 2003, where he is going to declare the following. Now, after the toppling of Saddam Hussein, okay, I'm being told that I have to stop. So I'm stopping here. Let me wrap. We will have the Arab Spring in 2011, where all these Arab leaders who were supporting the Palestinians will all be toppled one by one or be killed. And fast forward in 2017-18, after President Trump comes to power, the new US administration will announce the creation of an Arab NATO, where Americans, they will try to mobilize Iran, both Arab states, which are going to sign the Abrahamic Accords in 2020, to form an Arab NATO against Iran, which on the other hand, since 2006, Iran will form the so-called Axis of Resistance, where we'll have Iraqi, Syrian, Yemeni, Lebanese, and Palestinian militias resisting the Israeli genocide. The end result, where is the Palestinian issue today, 128 years after? With the support of the United States and Great Britain, the Zionists, they have won again. They have committed a genocide in Gaza. They have destroyed Hamas, Hezbollah. They have toppled the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad. And now President Trump has announced that he will ethnically cleanse Gaza and turn Gaza into Riviera of the Middle East and give a final solution to the Palestinian issue. Sorry for taking so long. I'm stopping here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Dr. Wolsey, for your presentation. I'm sorry I have to stop you because we have 2 other speakers and the audience are waiting. I think your presentation was very clear, and it has given a historical survey of how the Zionists came to Palestine and occupied it illegally, to the extent now Palestine has become Israel with the help of the European power. With this, we move on to our second speaker, Dr. Ahmad Al-Muhammadi. Dr. Ahmad Al-Muhammadi is an assistant professor at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, ISTAC IIUM. Currently, he is also an adjunct professor at Minhaj University, Lahore, Pakistan. And he's also the deputy director of Center for Counter Islamophobia and Global Engagement at International Islamic University, Malaysia. And he's also an active research fellow on politics, future research, and Malaysia. With this, may I respectfully call upon Dr. Ahmad Al-Muhammadi to speak on global implications of war on Gaza. He will be focusing on global implications of war on Gaza. فليتفضل Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good afternoon from Kuala Lumpur here. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate Prof. Tamim Osama and the team at IIMU for organizing this discussion, this forum. The title of our forum is the Occupation, War, Resistance, and Surviving Genocide. And I think that the first speaker, Dr. Olsi, just now has provided excellent background to the event, to the topic that we are going to discuss today. He started with the historical background and evolution of that event that has taken place before, and he also brought up this recent event that happened recently. And I think that was a very, very good discussion. Therefore, I would like to build upon that background that has been built upon by the Dr. Olsi. I would like to share with you 7 points here, and I'm going to speak to you on the global implication of the war in Gaza. Let me begin by saying that, first of all, the event of that's taken place on this October 7 is not the beginning of all the war and conflict that happened in Palestine. It's actually, as Dr. Olsi has demonstrated to you, it has started much earlier. The genocide that has taken place recently is not the first time that happened. It happened so many times before, and it is one of those events in modern times. The first point that I would like to mention to you is how the world take it. How the world take the war in Palestine, in Gaza. I think there is 2 perspectives here. One is the Muslim Ummah around the world view the event has taken place in Palestine as part of the event that affect the Ummah. Palestinian people is part of the Ummah, therefore whatever suffering and plight that they are experiencing, that they are suffering, is actually being suffered, be also being felt among the Muslim Ummah around the world. That is the first thing. That is the reason why we can see that there is a massive uprising, there is a massive demonstration that we can see around the world in the Muslim capitals. But actually, the second point with regard to this reaction, it is also a global reaction. You can see that is a global reaction on this event. Actually, the war in Gaza become a rallying point of humanity around the world, which means that it is not only happened in the Muslim capital, but it's also happened across the world, in the Latin America, in America itself, in Europe, in Africa, in many parts of the world. You can see that people are expressing disgust to what happened in Palestine. The action of the Zionist Jewish governments led by Benjamin Netanyahu was very disgusting. And that is the reason why there is a massive reaction from the international community and also people in the Muslim world. So I think this is the first point that I'd like to present to you. That is, we regard the Palestinian struggle, the suffering that the Palestinians are experiencing, is a part of the Ummah. This is felt by us as well, is here. Second point, the war in Gaza exposed who is actually the real face of humanity. Whether it is the Western power, because they always claim or self-proclaim as the champion of human rights, the champion of rule of law, and everything must be done based on the rule of law. And whenever this war happened in Palestine, when there is an atrocities committed by the Jewish state led by Benjamin Netanyahu, by IDF, the United States especially, and the Western allies has gone silent, even not only silent, but also defended them without any sense of humiliation, without any sense of honor. It is very embarrassing, in my view, that the people who self-proclaim as the champion of human rights, the champion of dignity of humanity, has defended genocide and atrocities committed by such kind of force in Palestine. So I think this is actually what exposed us. So the world right now know who is the Western power really. Not, they know already actually, but what happened in Palestine right now has confirmed their belief. And I think this is what makes the rhetoric, the narrative propagated by a person like Osama bin Laden become very popular. Osama bin Laden, if you listen to him, is going to say that they don't trust the Western powers because they killed their own president. That's what Osama bin Laden said. And they also say that, look what happened in the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Who is the real terrorist, really? So by looking what happened right now, the narrative and the discourse propagated by the group, even though we disagree with what they have done, but the narrative is gaining traction at this time. I think this is what worries me a little bit. So that is the second point. The third point is, I think that we are arriving at a moment of the age of disillusion. People in the world today, whenever they saw people who proclaim themselves as the champion of democracy and human rights, has suddenly become the defender of genocide and atrocities. This makes them very confused. What's going on in the world today? Which means that it sent a message. It sent a message that you got to remember who rules, the law or the might. By now they would know that if there is in one hand there is a rule, and the other hand there is a might. The might rules. The mighty rules. It's not the law. So right now, we make a conclusion. The international community and anybody who are witnessing this event has reached a conclusion that there is no way that we can rely on the rule of law. We will rely on the rule of the might. And I think this is the manifestation of the realpolitik. There is nothing else. So what makes the rule stand, the order of the world today, is the realpolitik. It is not based on the rule of law. And I think this is the third point that I would like to mention. And I think that it's also, by now, I think the countries that gain most from this event is Russia and China. Russia and China is gaining most because United States has lost its moral legitimacy because they failed to play the rules as the so-called the champion of human rights, as what they claim. I think this is very, very embarrassing for the country like the United States, who claim themselves to be the champion of human rights, has suddenly do not live up to the standard. The fourth point I'd like to mention is, I think it's also been mentioned by Dr. Osi just now, about the threat of Zionism. The threat of Zionism is a reality. And as you can see, that they can expand, they can be translated not only in terms of ideology, but from ideology to real occupation, real destruction in the Middle East. And I think by now we should be aware of this. And we also not to forget the role of, or the factor of, Netanyahu in this context. Netanyahu, actually, if you have a time, you can read his, he wrote a book actually on fighting terrorism, International Terrorism Challenge and Response. I think it's published in somewhere in 1981. It was published. He identified who is the terrorist, and he considered anybody who against Israel is the terrorist, regardless if it is a state or group or individual. So any state any organization or group or any individual who opposed or who pose threat to the state of Israel is considered terrorists. That's it. That's his definition. So I think that is the reason why whenever Hamas launched an attack on that October 7, he used that justification to disseminate or to pulverize Hamas to the total. So that is the first point, the fourth point. The fifth point is, I think it is also important that we have to reflect on this point, that I think that the Western countries, the Western countries fail to understand one thing about Muslim Ummah. They fail to understand that Muslim is ready to die for their religion, meaning that they are ready to perform their jihad to defend themselves. Whatever happened, they would be ready and willing to sacrifice themselves for religion, for their God, and for their people. And I think that what happened in Palestine right now, it is not the first time. We have seen this thing happen before. We have seen this thing happen in Libya, in Algeria, in many parts of the world. And you also can see this thing happen in Afghanistan. How many years that the war has been fought during Soviet, and then later on American occupation, up to the 2021, and suddenly Taliban has returned back to power. So this is the history. This is the story of the jihad movement. And also it's happened in Syria. In Syria recently, in 2025, which is very recent, is again proved the point that I think that Muslim is ready to do this responsibility, even though it takes how many years it's going to be. It doesn't matter. I think that is very, very important for them to learn about this lesson. And the second last point that I would like to share with you is the what happened in the war in Gaza is going to radicalize a lot of people. I mean, radicalize is in the sense that it changed the mind of a lot of people. It's instilled certain the grievances. You imagine the people who are witnessing what is happening in Gaza right now. They are now at the age of 5, 6, 7, 10, 15, 20 maybe. What's going to happen to them in the next 20 years? The certain grievances, I don't think that they can accept what happened to their people, to their countries, and what they have witnessed throughout the war. These people is going to live, and there is a psychological scar in them, and they're going to remember. And this is going to, we are going to see the impact in the next 10, 20 years' time. So I think this is also very important implication. And the last point is, right now, the world is talking about the cessation of war. The world is talking about the conflict resolution. And very, very interesting that the President Trump recently is talking about the taking over of Gaza and rebuilding into a Riviera of the Middle East. Well, as you know, the President Trump is talking a lot, something like this. But I think there is a lot of resistance from the people. But I think in the context of Malaysia, Malaysia is ready to play its role, consistent with its long-standing foreign policy to support Palestinian. And I think that's another challenge that we are facing is the Muslim and Jewish relations. It is very, very difficult to repair right now. There was this discussion yesterday with our participant from the leadership programs at ISTAC yesterday. What is the future of Jewish-Muslim relations because of this war? So there are two perspectives that we can see this from political perspective and from the doctrinal perspective. How can we deal with this? Are we going to fight forever? Are we going to find some closure to this kind of conflict? So that's all, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that the sharing is useful, and I look forward for a discussion. Thank you very much. And back to the moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad Al Muhammadi, for your presentation. Very interesting and relevant one. We have now with us another speaker who is none other than Emeritus Professor Dr. Muhammad Nazari Ismail, who is a professor at the Faculty of Business and Economics, University of Malaya. And he's also a director of Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies, University of Malaya. He is also the chairman of BDS, Malaysia and Palestinian Progressive Association, Malaysia. In 2018, he was one of the participants in the Freedom Flotilla boat to Gaza. He has written and edited 8 books, including Till Death Do Us Part, The Growth of the Global Banking Industry and Its Insidious Effects, published by University Malaya Press in 2018, which was one of the winners of the 2019 National Book Award in the economics category. And Ending Settler Colonialism in Palestine, Professor Emeritus Dr. Nazari is the editor of University Malaya Press. He holds a BSc in economics from University of Wales, UK, MBA from the State University of New York, USA, and PhD from the University of Manchester. Professor Dr. Muhammad Nazari bin Ismail will be focusing on boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel as our contribution to the cause of justice in Palestine. So this is the focus of his presentation today. With this, may I respectfully call upon Professor Dr. Nazari Ismail to deliver his speech.
Thank you very much, Professor Tamim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulil Karim wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you again to the organizer for inviting me to speak today, and I will, as stated just now, focus on the issue of boycott, divestment, and sanction of PDS as our contribution. May I share my slides? Okay. Now, Professor Olsi just now covered in a very excellent way the history of the settler colonialism project in Palestine. So I'm not going to talk too much about it. I don't think I can do any better job than what Professor Olsi did. So I will go straight actually to the issue of what are we going to do to contribute to the cause of justice in Palestine. I'll go straight to the BDS movement. This was actually launched by the Palestinian community, Palestinian civil society, supported by 170 Palestinian NGOs, which cut across the spectrum of Palestinian society. As we know, Palestinian society consists of the Islamic groups. There are also Christians, non-Muslims. There are also nationalists, and also there are socialists, even communists. But all of them, interestingly, support the BDS movement. So you can see that the BDS movement actually represents the Palestinian society's attempt in order to free their country. There are groups that resort to armed struggle, which is legitimate, even according to international law. But the BDS movement choose to adopt a non-violent approach, which tries to go according to international law. In order to understand the objectives of the BDS movement, it is important to remember that there are three components of the Palestinian society now. Number one is the refugees in exile, including those in Gaza, in Lebanon, in even in Saudi Arabia, and so many other countries in Jordan. So this is one component. The second component of Palestinians are those who are under occupation in the West Bank and also the Gaza Strip. And the last one are the Palestinians who did not flee or who did not leave Palestine, historic Palestine, after the 1948 war, which was described by Dr. Olsi, Professor Olsi. So they became Palestinian citizens of the Israeli state. So these are the major three components of the Palestinian society. So the objective of the BDS movement is actually can be understood by looking at these three components. Number one, which touch upon the component, the refugees. The demands of the BDS movement is that Israel must recognize the right of return of Palestinians to their homeland, which is actually according to international law, which I mentioned just now. The BDS movement tries as much as possible to accommodate international law. So the right of return, as we know, is actually encapsulated or guaranteed by the United Nations itself under Resolution 194 passed by the United Nations in 1948, which says that after the ending of the war in 1948, all Palestinian refugees must be allowed to return to their homeland, including in historic Palestine, or what is called Israel now. But as we know, until today, Israel has not honored this right of the Palestinians. They are still deprived of the right of return, even though it is actually recognized by international law. The second demand of the BDS movement is that Israel must end the occupation of Arab lands, the West Bank especially, but also Gaza, which is under blockade now. So ending the occupation of Arab lands must be implemented by Israel. But as we know, they have not honored this. Since 1967, they have occupied the West Bank. But the United Nations passed Resolution 242 in 1967 itself, which says that they must end the occupation and withdraw from the Green Line. So the demand of the BDS movement is that they must observe the Resolution 242. Otherwise, they are subject to boycott, divestment, and sanction. The third one is that Israel must end the oppression and discrimination of Palestinians living in historic Palestine now, which is now called Israel, which is the right recognized by international law. Every citizen living in any country must not discriminate against any group within their country. So the same thing should apply to Palestinians living in Israel now, because now they are being discriminated, because even the law, the basic law, or you can say Israel does not have a constitution, as we know. They have a basic law that says that Israel is a Jewish state and the national language is Hebrew. It's no longer, Arab is not recognized as an official language of the country, and the state does not give priority to Jews. So, and we know that. That's why Palestinians are not free to move anywhere, to stay anywhere in what is the so-called state of Israel now, because the so-called state of Israel now is actually controlled under the Jewish National Fund, which decides who can live where, and Palestinians are not free. So it is just one of the many, many laws that discriminate against Palestinians. So the demands of the three demands of the BDS movement are this, and if Israel fail to fulfill these three demands, then we call upon the international community, governments, organizations, and the ordinary people to boycott Israel and to boycott organizations or companies that are complicit with Israel. Excuse me. The BDS movement is coordinated by the BDS National Committee, which was set up in 2007 after a conference in Ramallah. This body or this committee is a coordinating body for the BDS campaigns worldwide. And the General Council of the BDS National Committee is made up of groups that constitute the whole spectrum of Palestinian society I mentioned just now, Islamic, seculars, left-wing, etc. And these are some of the current members of the BNC, which, as I mentioned just now, cut across the spectrum of Palestinian society. We in Malaysia has established a movement which work together in partnership with the BDS National Committee. We call ourselves the BDS Malaysia, which was initiated by a number of NGOs in 2000 and following a conference held at the University of Malaya in 2015. And we are registered with the Registrar of Society, ROS. So we are a registered NGO, and we have organization members as well as individual members. These are the founding organization members of BDS Malaysia. We have Viva Palestina, PCOM, we have Quds Foundation, also Aqsa Sharif, now MyCare. So we are part of the global BDS movement. We work closely with the BDS National Committee. We refer to the BDS National Committee on policy issues, and we call all Malaysians to be part of the global BDS movement. And there are now chapters of BDS all over the world, including in Japan, in Korea, in New Zealand, Australia, of course in Europe, as well as the strongest and most active at the moment is actually in America. So the BDS movement in America is very, very strong and very, very active, especially among the youth and university students. These are the NGOs that are supporting us in Malaysia. The BDS movement is inspired by the success of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. Because what happened was, as we know, there was apartheid in South Africa before, but international boycott of South Africa was responsible for ending apartheid in South Africa. When the global community realized of the injustice that was taking place in South Africa, they decided to boycott South Africa. So South Africa was not allowed to participate in sporting actions, sporting activities, sporting competition. They were not allowed to participate in the World Cup, in the Olympic, etc. And then later on, companies started to boycott South Africa as well. Right? They were isolated completely, economically, socially, culturally, and in the end, what happened was Israeli apartheid ended in 1994. Okay, so that shows that boycott can actually successfully end unjust regimes. So if we can do that to apartheid South Africa, we can also do the same to apartheid Israel, or genocidal now. Genocidal, we can call now genocidal Israel. But the boycott attempts or the BDS activities or approach of the BDS movement is a targeted one rather than an untargeted boycotts. So this is what I want to explain here. The BDS movement focused the boycott efforts on a small number of companies for maximum impact. There are many companies which are complicit with Israel. Actually, any company that operates in Israel have an office, or do business in Israel deserves to be boycotted. They deserve to be boycotted because they are helping the Israeli economy. Unfortunately, there are many of them. Hundreds and hundreds of them are operating in Israel. You can, for example, I mentioned to you, you have Toyota, you have Mercedes-Benz, BMW, you have Samsung, all the Korean companies, the Chinese companies, they are all operating in Israel, and therefore they are complicit. However, if you want to boycott all of them, it will not produce. They are not effective. It's not going to be very effective. So the BDS movement say we will focus on a small number, and these are the targets of our boycott efforts. These are our previous target list, but after the October 7 incident, this is now the targeted list, the priority boycott targets of the BDS movement, and these are the companies that are targeted because they are complicit. So the criteria for selecting them is, of course, the level of complicity. They must also be global, so that people know about them. More people know about them, as well as they are not difficult targets. We have to go for what's called low-hanging fruits. When you have initial success, then we can go to the next one. That will encourage the BDS movement, encourage people to engage in boycott efforts if they see success. So we go for targets that we can reasonably achieve success. There are 3 categories at the moment. Yeah, 4 actually. The 4th one I will mention afterward. So the first category is the priority boycott targets. Chevron, which operates Malaysia under the Caltex brand. You have Intel, you have Dell. These are all strong supporters of Israel. HP, for example, they provide technological support to the Israeli government. You have pressure targets. The pressure targets of the BDS movement, such as Google, such as Amazon, Booking.com, we are not calling people to boycott them because it's difficult to boycott Google, but we call the international community to put pressure. We call them pressure targets. We write articles and we hold seminars to explain how they are complicit, to make them become embarrassed, so that tell them you are not being ethical and you actually deserve to be boycotted, even the people do not boycott you. However, you are actually complicit in genocide, you are complicit in apartheid. That is called pressure targets. And the next one is organic boycotts supported by the BDS movement. These are companies that are boycotted by the ordinary people already. For example, like McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut. Why? Because in the case of McDonald's in Israel gave free food to the soldiers. Same thing with Burger King and Pizza Hut. So when people are boycotting these companies, the BDS movement say, all right, we support these efforts because their efforts have got a basis. So these are the companies that I mentioned just now. A number of years ago, about 6 years ago, the BDS movement targeted Puma because Puma is complicit, being a main sponsor of the Israeli Football Association. Alhamdulillah, after 5 years, Puma did not renew, declared that they will no longer sponsor the Israeli Football Association, and now we have dropped them from the list. That shows that when we focus our efforts on a global company, they will suffer losses, and they will know that they realize that by being complicit, by supporting Israeli regime, the people around the world will boycott them, and they will lose business. And that's what happened to Puma, and Puma decided to no longer sponsor, and no major sport company have actually replaced Puma. One unknown company from Germany, I think, decided to replace, but it's not unknown. It's unknown. The major ones refused to sponsor the Israeli Football Association. Okay, I'll just take another few minutes if Professor Tami will allow me. I just want to say that at the moment, these are some companies I mentioned just now. Okay. This is another category. Actually, these are divestment targets. these are companies that we are calling the international community to stop doing business with them and take out your investment from them. One example of this, these are actually listed by the United Nations, companies that are complicit with Israeli injustice. Caterpillar, for example, they provide the bulldozers used by the Israeli military. So we call on all funds, call all investors to withdraw their investment in Caterpillar unless Caterpillar stops supplying the bulldozers to the Israeli military. And we call companies like, in Malaysia, we have GLCs, which are actually doing business with Caterpillar. We are calling the GLC Samdabi in Malaysia to stop doing business with Caterpillar unless Caterpillar stops doing supplying bulldozers, killer bulldozers to the Israeli military. We also have Hyundai Heavy Industries doing the same, supplying equipment to the Israeli military to destroy Palestinian homes. Okay, I've already explained about Madonna. Now, I want to mention one company that decided to divest completely from apartheid Israel was G4S, a security company, because they were also boycotted by businesses in Europe, by companies in Europe because of their complicity. They were providing security services to the Israeli prisons. Okay, now Israel is very fearful of boycott. You can see articles, discussion in Israel, how they will suffer if the BDS movement is successful. So there are reports, there are very reports where Israel says that they are being, they are going to lose business, they are going to lose reputation, because now the BDS movement is getting a lot of support all over the world. University professors, students, for example, right? I showed to you down. University students, especially around the world, are supporting the BDS movement. And also among Jews as well, there are very famous Jews who are supporters of BDS movement. And this is another headline that shows that even in America itself, the New York University student government passes a resolution that support BDS. And there are other examples of artists and performers refusing to perform in Israel because of pressure by the BDS movement. Okay, and then we just this is just to share with you. And public awareness now, many people are aware of BDS efforts and supporting the BDS efforts all over the world. And you can see the response in Israel, the politicians and the leaders of America and Israel talking about the danger of boycotts and the danger of BDS. Okay, now there are professors who refuse to allow students to do internship in Israel. Universities who refuse to have conferences if there are Israeli academics who participate and representing their universities. And as a result, even the cabinet minister in Israel says that BDS movement is a terror organization. Okay, and you can say that, you can see some of the response by some ministers saying that that the BDS campaign is the greatest threat to Israel, that BDS is Israel's most serious strategic threat. Okay, and even the late President Shimon Peres said that the danger of an economic boycott to be far more palpable than a security threat. And at a conference in 2018, one minister in the Israeli cabinet, Israel Katz, he called, now he is the defense minister, he called for the focused civilian elimination of the leadership of BDS. That shows how serious they see the threat of BDS is. In the US, they managed to, the Zionist lobby even convinced the American president to sign anti-BDS bill, as well as the Congress and the Senate, making it federal crime to boycott Israeli settlement. And you can see how clearly Hillary Clinton trying to pander to the Zionist lobby, saying that if she became president, she would have made countering BDS her priority as president of America. Okay, all the politicians all promised to act against BDS in America, American president. The Senate passed anti-BDS law and then sent them to the House of Representatives, who also passed the law in the US to make it BDS illegal. So now, in conclusion, Israel is very weak now. Its success depends on the factors of the West supporting the project, the settled colonial project, as well as internal strength in Arab and Muslim countries. But the weaknesses in American and European economies will probably mean a weakness in their support for Israel. So the end for Israel is coming very soon. But what is important is democratic and just environment all over the world, especially in Muslim countries, because when you have democratic situation in Muslim countries, the people in those countries will be able to participate in the BDS movement and to support the Palestinian cause, as we saw in some countries like Egypt. But now, because it's no longer democratic, that's the problem. The support for Palestine and BDS is problematic in some of these countries. Recently, an activist, BDS activist in Morocco was arrested. Fortunately, after pressure on the Moroccan government, the BDS activist was released a few days ago. So these are challenges facing BDS Malaysia, basically ignorant about the issue, also because they are not willing to suffer economic losses, because once you, when you are successfully, when you are successful in calling consumers to boycott certain brands, some businesses may suffer losses and they are not willing to accept these losses. That is why the BDS movement is also under pressure by some groups in Malaysia, some consumer groups in Malaysia, some even religious bodies are also critical of the BDS movement, because they see that some of them see that the fate of some Muslim workers in some of these companies is more important. For some reason, they see them as more important than the Palestinian cause, which is very sad. What we should be thinking about the Ummah as a whole, and especially what's happening in Palestine. This should take priority over some economic sacrifice that has to be borne by Malaysian workers. So in summary, Israel must be boycotted, the global BDS movement must be supported. The BDS movement is getting stronger due to awareness all over the world. There are challenges due to economic sacrifices that are inevitable. But if we have a strong spirit of justice and human rights, then there is no reason why we shouldn't support the global BDS efforts. Thank you very much for having me. I give back the microphone to Professor Tamim. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Nazri bin Ismail. Your presentation is really something that our audience must know. Of course, they may be knowing earlier, but you have given us full information. If you allow us to share your slides with our participants, we will do that. With this, thank you once again, Professor Nazari, for your presentation. Let us have some questions from the audience. You may directly ask or write in chat box. While waiting for questions from the audience on the screen, I have one question from a participant from Nepal. He says Nepal is a secular federal republic country after we have thrown the king and the Hindu state. We are a kinder students to understand the global situation related to religious and ethnic issues. So we would like to learn from you all. And the question is how the global resistance can be done. How resistance can be done globally. That is the question from the participant from Nepal. His name is Usha Titikshu, something like that. Can any one of the speakers answer?
Can I
Yes,
respond?
yes, most welcome.
All right. So, I mean, to the question how a global response can be made to Israeli Zionism is, look, Israel was created by war. It was World War I. And then World War II emboldened the role of Zionism. So in my humble opinion, only a major world war where the Anglo-Zionist empire will be defeated will give an end to this colonial settler state. Or the other option is if we will have a ruler who will come to the United States, because we have to accept it. Our planet nowadays is ruled by the Americans, and without the US support, Israel will not exist. So, I mean, Israel is not Israel. Israel is the United States of America and Great Britain. So unless we have a regime change in the United States, or unless we have the fall of the American empire, then Israel will continue to exist. And for those who have, I think it was mentioned by Dr. Al-Muhammadi, the book of Benjamin Netanyahu, Fighting Terrorism. For those who have have read the books of Netanyahu, there is another book or conference which was organized by Netanyahu and his father, Ben-Zion Melikovsky. And in this conference, which was organized, if I'm not wrong, in 1979, where the Zionists and the Jonathan Netanyahu Institute in Jerusalem had invited many world leaders, including George Bush I. In that time, the Zionists, they had identified Soviet Union as one of the major terrorist states which the Zionists had to destroy. So Israel is the byproduct of the Anglo-American Empire. And for as long as the Anglo-American Empire does not transform itself, does not understand that Israel brings more harm to it than good, Israel will continue to exist, in my humble opinion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Olsi, for your answer. We have one from the audience. His name is Mera Silu. He wants to ask a question. Can you unmute, Brother Mera? Can you unmute and ask your question?
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Welcome.
Okay, I think this question is addressed to Dr. Olsi, since you mentioned about the start of the whole thing with the first Zionist conference in 1897. Okay, I'm not sure if you're aware. I think you are aware of Henry Ford in the 1920s published a book called The International Jew, where he talks about the Jewish threat, but more to the Christian Americans. Okay, and the book has an appendix called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Yeah, and then that thing, according to the stories, is something that they planned after the 1897 conference, a whole set of steps of how to conquer the world, even the creation of 3 world wars to create the current condition. Yeah, and then instead, somebody found it along the way, intercepted on a journey or something. But the thing is, the Jewish lobby said it is a hoax. My question is,
extra hot.
is the Protocol of the Elders of Zion authentic? Yeah. If
Regular
so,
sugar.
you see it progress and unfolds now.
Regular sugar.
Can you hear?
Yes,
I think-
yes.
Yeah, we
I
are
can
Somebody
hear
is
you, but there is someone who has
Anna.
opened her. Yeah, there is someone who is
Can you
open
please?
the microphone.
ANA.
Can someone mute the
016
sister?
May I request those who do
864
not ask questions to mute first?
61
I think the
21.
there is disturbance. Sister Amin Turan,
Yes.
can you mute? Okay, Dr. Olsi or anyone can answer the question
Yeah,
of
I mean, coming to the question of Mr. Mera, Sister Amina, she doesn't want us to, don't want to let us to answer. Now, the thing is this, that the Jews will claim that the protocols of elders of Zion is a fake book made by the secret police of the Tsar, etc. I have read that one. Now, the question coming to answer to Mr. Mera, look, if we see what Israel is doing today, and what the Zionist lobby is doing today by attacking the Catholic Church, by attacking Russia, by attacking Islam, by attacking the organized Christianity, by pushing the LGBT agenda, and by pushing the de-Christianization of the West, by making wars against the Muslim countries, by forcing Muslims to go as refugees in Western Europe, by nationalizing European nation state, someone might come into a conclusion that even if the protocols of the elders of Zion was a book, was not written by the Jews, but by the secret police of the Tsar, it is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, what the Zionists are doing today is that they have destroyed Christianity in the West. For those who follow Russia, for example, President Vladimir Putin, he even accused a few weeks ago those people who are destroying the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. And for those who know Russian history, Kiev is the Jerusalem of the Russians, because this is the city where they were baptized and they were Christianized. And President Putin declared that the people who are destroying our church happen to be Jews. And if we see the history of the Catholic Church, and many claims that many European leaders have done, is that in some particular moments of history, rightly or wrongly, Jews were found to conspire against nation state. And here, let me remind our viewers about Winston Churchill, who was the colonial secretary of Great Britain and later the prime minister who defeated Hitler. In 1920s, in 1920 or 1922, he wrote an article. I forgot the full title, but the main content of the title was The Good Jews and the Bad Jews. And in 1920s, Churchill was in a way appealing to the Jews and telling to them, look, there are some good Jews, and those good Jews are our Jewish bankers of London who support us. But there are some bad Jews, he was saying, and those are the terrorist Bolsheviks who killed the Tsar in Russia and are destroying Christianity, and they threaten monarchies, including the British monarchy. And if you study the life of Churchill, and in a way, Churchill is in a way the father of Zionism. It was he and under his watch that the Jewish settlement was established in Palestine. But by the end of his life, Churchill became an anti-Semite when he saw what the Zionists, especially the group of Vladimir Jabotinsky, the Irgun and Lehi gang, started to do to British officials. They became terrorists. They started to kill the Brits. And by the way, there was a very interesting article in Jerusalem Post a few weeks ago, where the previous Israeli president, Rubin, I forgot his full name. I have to Google it.
Elmet, I think.
Sorry?
Ehud Elmet.
No, not Ehud Olmert. Rubin, the previous president.
Reuven.
Yeah. So he gave an interview to Jerusalem Post, and he said that we had very better time with Queen Elizabeth. She never invited us to her palace because she considered us, the Zionists, to be terrorists. So if you talk today to the British royal family to this day, the British royal family, even though they don't say it publicly, they do not like the Zionists. So this was a summary. Probably someone else.
Thank you, Dr. Olsi, for your answer. Anyone among the panelists?
Professor Tamim?
Nazari,
Yeah, okay.
would you like to add, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's also very important for us to realize that the Zionists are not only Jews. According to Professor Dr. Stephen Sizer, an academic who studied Christian academic who studied Zionism, Christian Zionism. Actually, he studied Christian Zionism, and he found out that of all the Zionists around the world now, 9 out of 10 are Christians, Christian Zionists. Only 1 out of 10 are Jewish Zionists. So the role of the Christian Zionists is also very important for us to understand how they influence Zionism and what's happening in Palestine. So in America, as we know, the Christian Zionists are very influential. They are also trying to influence the American political situation and American presidents. So whereas there are many young Jews now, especially, who are very critical of Israel, who are against Israel now. There are hundreds of Jewish protesters who went and occupied the Congress. And the BDS movement in America, many of these activists are actually Jews who are completely against Israel. So it is important for us to distinguish between anti-Zionist Jews and pro-Zionist Jews, and also anti-Zionist Christians and pro-Zionist Christians, as well as Zionists among Arabs, and also Malays. I know of Malaysians who support the concept of the homeland for the Jews. And of course, we know there are Arab regimes who are very supportive of Israel. They are also Zionists who believe that the Palestine should be given to the Jews. So there are also Zionists among Arabs. So I think our focus should be on all these Zionists from among all races and religions, rather than focus only on the Jews. Thank you very much.
Yes, Prof. Dr. Ahmad, you want to add anything?
No, probably move
Okay.
to the next
Thank
question.
you. There is another question from Dr. Kalim Alam. He is from King Abdul Aziz University, Jeddah. He's asking this question: how do you see greater Israel in making? We have been hearing about greater Israel. How do you see this phenomena? Dr. Olsi, maybe you can answer this question.
Yes, we have ministers of the present Netanyahu government, like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who they openly say that our Eretz Israel should not be what we have right now, which is the official Israel and the West Bank and Gaza Strip, but they even publish maps. And Smotrich, who is the Minister of Finance, he have been even on, I think he gave an interview to Deutsche Welle a few weeks ago, where he was saying, yes, Syria, Iraq, parts of Saudi Arabia, parts of Egypt belong to Eretz Israel. And a few weeks ago, we had the Foreign Ministry of Israel. They published a biblical map of Israel where they were showing Jordan to be part of the biblical Israel. And the Zionists, they do not hide this. I mean, they say it openly. And for them, because I didn't have time to finish my presentation, I mean, if we see the history of Zionism, Zionism started as an idea, then it was embraced by British imperialism, who sponsored it, and then they fought against British imperialism, and then they sided with the Americans. And as it was mentioned by Professor Nazari, we'll have the evangelical Zionists, and they are more extremist than the Jews. Like Professor Nazari, me myself, I've been in Israel, I've been to Palestine. I know many Jews, and many Jews, they simply hate Netanyahu, they hate Zionism. I do not know exactly what is the number, but I would probably say probably 50% of those who live in Israel nowadays, they do not know what is going on. Most of them, they are poor refugees, immigrants from Eastern Europe, from Russia, from Ukraine, who in 1990s, instead of immigrating to Canada or United States, they moved to Israel. And we have seen what happened now. I mean, when Hamas launched the attack against Israel, we had more than 500,000 Israelis who left Israel. Because, I mean, we have to understand, I mean, the reason, I mean, Israel is a very fake state. It runs on what they call Hasbara, or which is disinformation. They lie a lot. It happened to me in 2018 when I was invited by Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mahmoud Abbas, and I went to Ramallah. And in the time
Sorry,
when
I
I
can't
was
hear Professor Olsi. Can't hear you.
okay, can the others hear me?
Okay, I can hear
Professor?
you.
All right. So when I was traveling from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, I spoke with a number of Israelis, and I was telling them, do you know what happens when you go to Kalandia? Because Kalandia is the border between the West Bank and Jerusalem. For us who live in Kuala Lumpur, if I can give an example, is that if KLCC is Masjid al-Aqsa, Gombak is the area where you have the division between the West Bank and Jerusalem. And I was talking to some people, I was telling them, do you know that people are being killed when you cross the wall? And majority of Israelis, they don't know. You see, the majority of Israelis, they are simply victims of this fascist regime, which is being sustained by the United States. And Professor Nazari is very correct because, look, I mean, as I mentioned before, for as long as we have this Anglo-American empire, which invented Israel, Israel will not exist. And we have seen what happened in the recent 15 months war, which the axis of resistance led by Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, and Yemen, and the Iraqi militias made against Israel. The state was being totally destroyed. People were running away because, I mean, Israel is a evangelical imperialist project. But to clarify something about the evangelical Zionists, that we have even many here in Malaysia, we have even some churches where people pray for Israel here. And these evangelical Zionists, they are more Jews than the Jews, but they're anti-Semites. I mean, if you know their real ideology, is that they want their dream was to gather all the Jews from all over the world in Palestine and to hurt those Jews against Islam, because they believe that only in this way God will bring that back Jesus, and these Jews then later they are going to repent and convert to Christianity. I mean, the evangelical Zionists, while from outside we might perceive them as being pro-Israelis, they play with Israel. For them, Israel is an experiment in their messianic battle because they believe that Muhammad is the Antichrist and Jesus is the Messiah. And they also believe that the Jews are cursed people, if you know their theology. But in contrast to the Catholics and Orthodox Christians, the Orthodox Church, who historically they perceive Jews as cursed people who had to repent for killing Jesus, the evangelicals, the Protestants, they have another theology. They see the Jews as guinea pigs that we have to send them to Israel, and there they have to fight, and only in this way God will bring back the Messiah, Jesus, and the kingdom of Jesus will be established. So it is a very complicated scenario, but the thing is that for as long as the United States will be run by this extremist evangelical Zionist lobby, the Muslim Ummah will always suffer and Palestinians will be massacred and massively killed.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Orsi. There is another.
Can I add a bit, Professor Tamim, to the...
Yes, most welcome, Prof. Most welcome.
Okay, yeah, the concept of Eretz Israel was a dream of the Zionists, but Alhamdulillah, I think based on what happened recently, the end of Zionism is very near. The war that they did on Gaza, the genocide, actually has now weakened them terribly. And there are many analysts who say that the reason why they accept the ceasefire is because they couldn't continue anymore. According to some reports, they lost probably more than 6,000 soldiers, which they didn't disclose this detail to the Israelis, to the Israeli public. The war cost them 280 million USD a day. They don't have enough money anymore to continue with the war. Many soldiers have deserted. They don't want to go to the battlefront anymore. So the public was against them. And the American government are also complaining about the money that they are giving to Israel. The American public is now very angry because their taxpayers' money are being used to kill babies and children. So now, just as Professor Ilan Pape, as I think some people may know, Professor Ilan Pape very well, who is the Jewish Israeli anti-Zionist professor based in the UK, stated that the signs are that Zionism is coming to an end, and the viciousness and the brutality that they did to the Palestinians recently is an indication that it is dying. And therefore, RSSI dream is coming to an end. But what we need now is to put more pressure, economic pressure, because now America is now having 36 trillion USD in debt. America cannot even afford to subsidize their own population's education. They cannot even help Americans who are suffering from the fire in California and the storms in Florida. And therefore, they are feeling the pain of the debt, and they know that by the Israeli project is hurting them so much. So they are coming to an end. But what we need to do now is to put more pressure through economic pressure, through making sure that the complicit companies suffer if they are related to the complicity. That's what we need to do to make the end of Zionism faster. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Nazari. Well, there is one comment followed by a question, and this question is raised by Ihsan Karim from Canada. He says, it is time now to start thinking and planning for empowering the Muslim Ummah to solve the Palestinian problem and any other problem affecting the Muslim Ummah and Muslim land. The question is how it can be achieved.
Oh, can I?
Yes, Prof, of course.
And then others can, Professor, other panelists, Dr. Ahmad, and also Professor Olsi can follow up. Now, at the moment, the reason why many Muslims are not helping the Palestinian cause, as we know, as I witnessed myself in Malaysia, for example, when we do campaigns against complicit companies, some Malaysians say that this is going to hurt our country economically, right? So they are more concerned about their economic well-being rather than the cause of justice in Palestine. So it is true what the Prophet ﷺ said that when the Qiyamah is near, you will see many Muslims, right? The Prophet said there are many Muslims. But the problem with them is that they have a disease in their heart. Wahan, the disease of Wahan. And what is the disease of Wahan? Is the disease of Ubbud Dunya wa Kariyatul Maut. They are more in love with the dunya and they are scared of death. So they are more concerned about material and economic being. They are thinking more about their economic well-being rather than the cause of justice in Palestine. And that is why they are not ready, for example, to boycott America, to boycott Israel, to boycott American companies. They are not ready to go against the US government, right? To upset the US government because of the fear that the US government will impose sanctions on them. So these are the problem. And it stems from the disease not only among the leaders. The leaders, as we know, they are the undemocratic leaders. They are only concerned about themselves, about their own palaces and remaining in power. But what about them? So this is one group, the leaders, the leadership who are corrupted and self-serving, but also the ummah who talk so much, but themselves are not willing to make sacrifice. And that's the reason why the leaders, therefore, continues to remain in power, as well as the leaders putting more priority on pleasing the Americans, because they are scared if the economy goes down, then they will lose their political power. So because they know at the end of the day, the Muslim Ummah sadly is more concerned about economic well-being rather than about cause of justice in Palestine. Thank you.
Professor, you have said the truth. Exactly, this is happening, and we have also heard from numerous sources the same. Anyone wants to add to this? I have a question which is specifically directed to Dr. Ahmed Al Muhammadi, coming from Dr. Kalima Al Mafjida again. Dr. Ahmed, is Ummah immune to civil wars where they kill each other from Sudan to Libya? Is there a solution?
Thank you.
Okay.
The history of the fitna, if I may use the term by Al-Ghazali, such as the civil war that happened, it is not a new thing in Islamic history. We have seen this thing happen during the time of the prophets, and then during the time of the Sahaba, Khulafa al-Rashidun. There is a group such as Khawarij who are opposing the leadership during that time. And after that, we can see the sectarian clashes, sectarian war that happened during the Abbasid, even during Ottoman, and in modern times as well. This group, whether we call it Khawarij or Neo-Khawarij, continue to exist until today. And I think in the context of, let's say we talk about Egypt, we can see this thing happen in Egypt. We can see this thing happen in Pakistan. You can see this thing happening even in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia also become the victims of extremism, or the so-called the new Khawarij here. So it is not, I mean, very difficult for us to avoid from, I mean, avoiding this kind of group which is mentioned in the Quran, that is la taghlu fi dinikum. I mean, there are always group who is al-ghulu in religion. So we have to deal with it. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman wrote a book, actually, Crisis of Muslim Mind. He identified the crisis of leadership. There are two crises, that is the political leadership and religious leadership. I think this is the thing that we have to look at. We need to develop leadership in political leadership and also in religious leadership. I think let us look at what happened in Syria right now. Syria right now, maybe they managed to topple the regime in Syria because they have a leadership. Young leaders who has certain vision, but guided by wisdom of the elders. They can do certain things. They can make a change. They can bring something, a fresh environment, rebuild their country that has been suffered for more than 50 years. We also can see this thing happen, for example, in Afghanistan. The new leadership came. And when Taliban came to power, you can see the Western media, how they play out the issues. They see that terrorists is coming back to power. And this thing happened. They try to portray that, people are leaving Afghanistan. When the situation, when stability came to Afghanistan, no one is talking about it right now anymore. There is no good news. There is no, there is a definitely good news in Afghanistan. There is a stability in Afghanistan, security especially. But the Western media doesn't highlight it. But if you talk about post-war, management, the first of all, they're going to talk about is security. They're going to talk about stability. This thing doesn't, it's not become headlines in the Western media whenever it's come to Afghanistan. What they talk about? They talk about hijab. They talk about education. What is going on in the Western media today? This is called agenda setting. This is called propaganda. Okay, so I think we go back again to the leadership, political leadership, and the religious leadership. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ahmed. This will be probably the last question, which is from Professor Hamidullah of India, from Kashmir in particular. He says, this is especially to Prof. Nazari, BDS movement is a very good initiative, but is there any collaboration with the millions of people of the world who came in open to support Gaza during the present NABCA. Instead of only targeting these companies, could we provide any alternative to these Israel supporting companies? Prof. Nazari.
Okay, thank you very much. I will say again, because I mentioned it just now, but I will say it again. Now, the BDS movement, have followed a targeted approach. We select certain companies, not all companies that are complicit, only certain targeted companies for maximum impact. And one of the criteria for selection is actually easy alternatives for the consumers, right? If you don't have any alternative, it will be difficult for you to boycott certain companies. That's the reason why Google is not classified under boycott targets, but under pressure targets, because it is difficult for you to find an alternative to Google. But the other companies that are under the boycott targets, I will mention one of them is Caltex in Malaysia, Chevron in America, but in Asia, Chevron works under Caltex brand name. Chevron is a company that prospect for oil in the Mediterranean Sea, and then share the money profit with Israeli government, giving billions to the Israeli government, so helping them militarily. So that is the reason why it's boycotted or target of boycott. In Malaysia, it's Caltex. So the brother just now asked, what's the alternative to Caltex? Surely I don't have to tell you who are the alternatives to Caltex in Malaysia or even in your country. There are many other petrol suppliers, gas stations that supply petrol. The BDS movement will not suggest a particular company for you to go, because we don't want to be accused by them as having an agenda to help certain other companies. We don't want them to say that. That will give them an excuse to say that, or the BDS movement is actually funded by, for example, Petronas or whatever. If we start saying that everybody should buy Petronas rather than Caltex, we're not going to do that, because they will accuse us of actually being funded an agenda of Petronas. We don't say that. So that is why we do not suggest any alternative. But we make sure that once we target a particular company asking you to boycott, you will see there are actually many alternatives that you can go to. For example, HP is targeted. Surely you know there are many other suppliers of computer products in the market out there. Do you need us to suggest to you what computer, what laptop to buy other than HP? Of course, you should know. So that is why we do not mention any other particular alternative, because we don't want to be accused of trying to help particular company to sabotage this company and then help other companies. No, we are focusing on companies that are complicit. The alternatives, we have already made sure that there are alternatives available. It's not difficult for people to find out. That's the reason why we are being supported by millions around the world at the moment. Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Nazari, for your response. I think this will be the last question. I think Brother Mera Silu has raised his hand. Would you like to ask your question? Okay.
Assalamualaikum. I think my question this time ties closely to what Dr. Muhammadi mentioned about leadership. Yeah, I think when you study also the whole question of Israel Zionism and all that, you can run also from the idea, the concept of eschatology. Yeah, I mean in Islamic eschatology, this is a whole idea about Dajjal and Imam Mahdi. Although some people think this whole probably, just focus, but it is part of the thing. But anyway, I would limit my question to this. How do you see the concept of Khalifah? Because, if you go back to 1807, the first thing they do before they were able to even form Israel is to break the Khalifah. When the Khalifah is gone, no support, then they can break up the land. So my question is, how do you see the idea of returning back to the Khilafah?
Very, very big question, controversial. But let me try to tackle that. The idea of Khalifa or Khilafah in this context is not alien in Islamic history. We have this before. People are trying to do it right now. For example, there is a group called the Hizb ut-Tahrir promoting the idea of Khilafah. And finally, we are going to end up having Khilafah too, regardless of whether it is now or in future. I think I'm not really surprised if we are now, I mean, living in the modern time, suddenly we have one, but for sure we're going to have in future because the arrival of Mahdi, for example, it means the arrival of Khalifa at the end of it. So they rightly done the things by destroying the Khalifa, by having done that, they destroy, they disintegrate the whole Ummah. And that is the reason why, I mean, at the end of the day, the Mahdi will come and they will reunite the Ummah again. And that is under the leadership of the one caliph, that is the Khalifa we know as the Imam al-Mahdi. I think that's the comment. And I would like to make a final remark also about the Israel and the superpowers. I think no countries in this world is able to destroy Israel. It is too powerful. No power is going to destroy United States. They are going to destroy themselves. Historically, we look at what happened in other civilization. You look at Roman Empire. You look at the Soviet Union before, and you look at the Western power right now. You know, in the West today, what do you know what they're talking about? They're talking about the problem of capitalism, destroying themselves. That is the whole idea. I think we are, as like Professor Nazari mentioned about, even though there is an effort, and maybe people is going to say like BDS is not going to affect them, it's going to be have a limited effect, but we are doing something actually, and doing something is better than doing nothing. And what we are doing here is actually in the context of Malaysia, economic sanction or boycott is one of the way that we can do, but we have to do it wisely. And I think we are going to see what is the end of it. The scholars, there is a book actually, written when there is a prime minister of Israel before Yitzhak Rabin, still in power. He convened a group of scholars in Washington. You know what the topic of discussion? Everybody need to present the history of rise and fall of civilization, how the civilization rise and how civilization fall. They invited historian. I think I don't remember the title of the book, but the idea is how to make Israel sustainable. They want to find the formula how to make the state sustainable, and they found the formula how to make it sustainable. But I think the power of the Almighty is greater than what they are planning to do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah. I think we have answered all questions in the chat box, and we have also answered the questions raised by Brother Mera. I don't see any other question unless and until our speakers have something to specifically point out to our participants.
Yeah, can I add something?
Yes.
Look, if we see the history of Israel, since its creation in 1948, Israel has been very successful against Muslims. It has defeated the Arab countries during the 4 Arab-Israeli wars. And with the peace treaty that Israel is going to have with Egypt in 1979, the Zionists, they thought that they won the war and they defeated Islam. But then what happened is that in 1979, when we will have the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and while in a way Israel triumphed over Arab Baathism and nationalism, a new force came into being in the Arab world, and that was the force of the political Islam. The recent war that we saw in Gaza, which I tend to call it the 5th Arab-Israeli war, even though we have the Iranians as well, was probably the final phase of Zionism facing the Arab and the Islamic world. This was the longest war in the history of Israel. It was 15 months war. Israel was never created to fight long wars. If we study the history of Israel with its Arab neighbors, their wars range from 1 week to 2 weeks, maximum 1 month. What was established since 2006 with the axis of resistance, where after the Americans and the Zionists, they thought that by destroying the Arab nation state, we will finally defeat the Muslims. What happened is that in the war of 2023, Israel had to face non-state actors. Hamas, Hezbollah, these are not states, they are non-state actors. But the resistance of the axis of resistance, while it was very successful, it was finally destroyed, according to my opinion, on December 8, 2024, when Israel very smartly, Zionism very smartly used the Sunni and Shia, the sectarian divisions in the Muslim world. The Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the terrorist group which toppled the government of Bashar al-Assad, for those who have followed the news, they were sponsored by USAID and by CIA. The present government in Damascus gave to Israel the greatest victory in its history after the Egyptian-Israeli peace of 1979. 2 days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu, he gave an interview for Newsmax, and he was praising himself and Israel about the recent war, because Netanyahu said, during the last war, we defeated Hamas, Hezbollah, we toppled Bashar al-Assad. It was our contribution for his toppling. And in this moment, we are witnessing a very dark chapter in the history of the Palestinian and Islamic resistance against Israel. The axis of resistance, which was established by Iran since 1979, with the establishment of Hezbollah in 1982, and the arming of Hamas by Syria and Iran has finally come to an end. In this very moment, Israel feels emboldened. The Zionists, they feel to be very strong and powerful. That's why now they're discussing about a final solution for the Palestinian issue, which would be the massive ethnic cleansing of Palestine, which will mean either the total assassination of every Palestinian who lives in Gaza and West Bank, or otherwise their deportation towards Egypt, Jordan, Indonesia, Albania, wherever, Somalia, wherever the Americans will. Now, coming to the question of Mr. Mera about eschatological signs, we know from our hadith, but the Zionists, they know, those who believe in the theories of Armageddon, is that the Zionists, they believe that before the last day or day of Qiyamah, the sons of Ishmael will fight against the son of Ishaq. So according to the Zionist theology, we Muslims, we are the sons of Ishmael, and Ishmael was the son of an unfaithful slave who was Hajar. And they believe in their theology that before the day of Qiyamah, the sons of Ishaq are going to defeat us, the sons of Ishmael. We are slaves, according to the Zionist theology. Now we have to see what is going to happen. Will Israel prevail? Until now, signs are good for Israel. In the year 2012, when I was at University of Toronto, we had one of the military advisors of the then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who came and delivered a speech at Mang Center, University of Toronto, which is one of the top Zionist think tanks of North America. And what he told us is that when we had the peace treaty with Egypt in 1979, we thought that we defeated the Arabs. That was the end. But he said what happened is that since the Islamic Revolution of Iran in 1979, we are facing this Islamic non-state actors who they are not a big problem for us, but they still create problems for us. Now, what Hamas did to Israel on 7th of October 2023, when this ragtag army, armed and funded by Iran, managed to break the security of Israel, even destroy the southern army of Israel, it showed to the Zionists that they are not immune. Now, the plan of Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas was to launch a land invasion of Israel. Israeli leaders know that they cannot fight the Arabs and the Muslims unless they fight them in distance. The Zionists, they cannot fight urban warfare. This advisor of Netanyahu told to us in 2012 was that the greatest nightmare for Israel would have been a tank invasion by Egypt. And because you're saying, according to our calculations, if Egyptians were to send towards us maybe 1,000 or 2,000 tanks, and if Egyptian tanks were to penetrate Israel, that would have been the end for us. And what we saw on 7th of October was that even though Palestinians were armed with RPGs and Kalashnikovs, they managed to break the Israeli security, and the Israeli state was in total chaos. The plan of Hezbollah and Hassan Nasrallah was to, in the future, they had planned to launch a real invasion of Israel, but unfortunately, they couldn't do this. And as we see, the situation today is the so-called axis of resistance is in total ruins. Iran is isolated. Syria has been taken by this extremist terrorist group, which is listed as terrorist even in Malaysia, and they are doing the bidding of Israel. They are fighting against Hezbollah, against Iranians. They are disarming the Palestinians, and they're even allowing Israel to invade the Golan Heights and Mount Heron and what have you. So the situation now seems very bad for the Palestinians. So probably we might be prepared to see further tragedies coming, and we shouldn't be surprised if Israel and the Americans, they even ethnically cleanse Gaza, and we as Muslim Ummah were not going to be able to do anything about it. Thank you very much. This was just my comment.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Olsi, for your explanation. Alhamdulillah, it is going to be 5 p.m. We have come to the end of our today's forum. On behalf of the International Institute for Muslim Unity, I thank first Professor Emeritus Dr. Nazari Ismail, Dr. Wolsi, Dr. Ahmad Al-Muhammadi, Dr. Abdulaziz Barghouth, and the participants for actively participating in this forum. Of course, the speakers have deliberated to the best of our expectation, and we have benefited a lot. And we are recording the speeches. We will, inshallah, upload the recorded video into our website. And if those who are interested in person, they can write to us, we can share with them. Before we end, can I request humbly the participants to open their camera so that we can have a photo for our record. So it will be our memory, inshallah. So this is a humble request, please. Sister Aziza, can you take a photo of the participants? Most of the cameras are opened. Aziza? Okay. Okay, Alhamdulillah. Once again, I thank you all very much for your presence, for your participation, for your contribution. Inshallah, we will have some other programs in 2 weeks' time organized by IIMU. As you all know, IIMU is committed to organizing programs related to Muslim unity, Muslim leadership, and also we have many other activities in collaboration with NGOs and other institutions and organizations globally. With this, I again thank you all very much. Wabillah tawfiq wal hidayah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you all very
وعليكم
much.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Nice program.
جاي.
ورحمة الله وبركاته.